Ladies and gentlemen, good afternoon, or good morning as the case may still be. My name is John Jablonski. I'm the president at Clinton Community College. It's my pleasure to welcome you to our campus on behalf of our Board of Trustees and our Chair, Nina Coolidge, on behalf of our students, faculty, and staff. We are delighted to play host today to this, the second in a series of 4 lectures and discussions on topics of significance in the future of our community. I also am very pleased to acknowledge the support that we have for this series of 4 events. The support comes from the Development Corporation, and today Dory Flynn Kurtz is here, the president of the Development Corporation. We're also honored to have in the audience Don Dooley, the chairman of the board of the Development Corporation. Thank you all for taking part with us today. This is designed to be a panel discussion and opportunity for audience questions and answers near the end of the program. Without further ado then, let me introduce our moderator for today. Lois Clermont is editor of the Press Republican and will proceed with the rest of the formalities today. Thank you, Lois.
So we have a group of local experts here who are going to talk about characteristics that give a community a competitive advantage. These ideas were developed in California, have been promoted here by the Workforce Investment Board. As John mentioned, if you have questions while people are talking, just jot them down, and Steve and Aaron are here and going to take those at the end and ask them of the panel. So there's lunch afterward, so we'll just have the panelists introduce themselves.
Hi, I'm Jake Short, Superintendent of Schools, Plattsburgh City School District.
Morning, Lisa Van Natten. I'm the Director of Physician Search at CVPH Medical Center.
My name is Joshua Kretzer. I'm the owner and designer at Pod Studio in Plattsburgh.
Good morning. I'm Jim Langley. I'm a county legislator and chair of the board.
Good morning. I'm Dory Kurtz from the Development Corporation in the County of Clinton IDA.
I'm an IDA member as well. I'm John Van Etten. I'm the regional manager for Glens Falls National Bank, and I'm the chair of the Workforce Investment Board. I will say that Paul Grasso would have loved to have been here today doing this. He's much more versed than I in workforce investment issues. But despite what you read in the paper on Sunday, he's not in Northern Ireland this week. He has an inner ear infection and is flat on his back. So with that, welcome.
We're glad you're here, John. Again, I'm John Jablonski, president of Clinton Community College.
So the first characteristic we're going to talk about is an effective education system. And Jake, why don't you tell us about some of the programs at Plattsburgh City Schools that will help people work into the workforce?
There's a couple different aspects, I think, as the public schools come into play. The first is having enough of a school program to make the North Country, all of our schools, an attractive place to come, live, work, and do business. If we don't have a certain robust nature of a school system, it would be very hard to attract people to, and continue to attract people to this area. On the other side, we all know that we're part of the complex side of the tax structure, so we know that we challenge the other end of the economic for business owners and private homeowners. So we feel stuck in between of our own contradictions within public school minds. However, within the city schools, one area that I think is highly important to talk about eventually, or talk more about, is the workforce readiness credential. That's more direct to the aspect of students getting into the employment field and businesses partnering with school districts to try and promote some more of those essential areas. The other then would branch over to Clinton Community College. I'll give John a second to reflect on this. At the other end of the scale, our CAP program, where we have college advanced placement courses within our high school that helps feed into both Clinton Community College, it's a partnership with Clinton, and other university systems. So the robust end there, and then also how we're trying to help promote students into the work readiness side. But I'll give John a little bit of time with that.
Yeah, that's a good setup. You know, if our community really is to have the competitive advantage that we all want it to have, we need to be working together across educational sectors. It's not just about what the grade schools are doing in isolation or the middle schools or secondary schools or the community college. It's really about, today people are calling it the cradle to career education system, and it's about how we work together. So Jake talked about our CAP program, which is the college advancement program, allowing high school students to really prove their mettle in terms of college readiness even before they're done with high school. We have a workforce development roundtable. We call it Workforce Development Roundtable, but it really is about how we build the workforce in terms of workforce readiness and the skills that those students, both traditional age students and adult students, need to really give our community a competitive advantage. So a lot of it is about how do we break out of our silos and work together, and I think the kinds of things that Jake talked about are good examples of that.
A good example might be Laurentian. You've both worked to try to get people trained for the new Laurentian project. Talk about that a little bit.
Well, with that, and the other just as important component to talk about are the technical trade programs that we participate in through BOCES, but also help feed into Clinton Community College. PAI program for the Plattsburgh Aeronautical Institute is a good example for Clinton County helping support that type of employer, or at least the atmosphere of Clinton County is one that we're ready to make changes and help prepare students for that workforce. Adori mentioned earlier, it's really intrigued me talking about the need of some flexibility and possibly mobility for people going into the workforce to be ready to change job careers, have cross-level training, because their lives will change in the new world that we're in, variety of businesses. I see that happening in the tech ed program at BOCES, the career technical side, and I see that with some partnerships between high schools and colleges. And I think we probably ought to talk more about those areas of what schools can do to stay flexible, because sometimes we're not very flexible, in helping the business sector in that development.
If I could jump in here for a minute and expand on this, I think all of us who, and I'm a former educator myself, you have to look at educating people for a changing workplace and training people for specific jobs that they can do that we have, and preparing them to take on potentially additional responsibility. So I think seeing those two things, those critical thinking skills and life skills that prepare people to be excellent citizens really help us in the workforce issue as well. So I think it's an important thing that we need to consider. Most of us, all of us live in one school district or another, and we all pay taxes. But I think we really need to look at the biggest asset that we have here in our community, or that any community has, is the people who live here, the people who are growing up here, and the people that we want to continue to be successful here. And I think Jake and John's organizations have, and BOCES have done really a good job of trying to cover the whole spectrum of the kinds of education and training that people need. And I think that's a good thing. At our organization, we have an education committee headed by Rick Grant, and they really are looking at what are the kinds of things that we can provide seed money to that have the potential to really train a broad spectrum of people, like Solid Foundations that does work with the trades, and the National Credential Work Readiness Program. These are really things that make a difference in the long term, and I think we're all going to be able to see that.
Do educational improvements always count? Do they always require more money? Are there things that could be done that aren't going to cost anything, or does everything come with a price?
Not necessarily. Not necessarily requiring more money. Some is just revamping, retooling the resources we currently have. An example of, and partly for us within education, is to be able to see outside of our walls, and that gets very hard. We stay so busy in our little mode of education that we have not paid as much attention to the business sector and its needs. One idea that Paul Grasso has been working on is trying to start a bit of an idea of externships for teachers, having teachers work or have experience in the business community sector, summertime, do some type of work for a business, so they can have a different level of understanding of what the real workplace looks like today, while back in the schoolhouse, so to speak. Then they'll be able to influence, change their curriculum very slightly, change the conversation in the classroom very slightly, and have a better connection instead of, well, if we don't do this, we'll have the two going two separate directions and we'll never help one another out. So it's an idea that he has. We've been working on a couple, piloting a little bit, either this spring or possibly into the summer if we can. Ideas like that really don't cost very much money. And changing how we think and how we do our business doesn't cost any money. That's the partnership that we really should be finding our ways to do.
That same process, I think, could also be applied to the students in the schools. Potentially, they could use time during the summer or during vacations to do more elaborate internship programs with area businesses as well, just to kind of get a feel of, you know, what vocation they might be interested in, to try to find direction at a much younger age.
It seems like internships are very important. Do you find that they help get people started at your bank?
Well, we're not big on using interns, but that's just us. But if I can, I just wanted to dovetail on what, or how this really came about was last, this was April, May of 2010, we had our Educator Business and Education Summit in Lake Placid. And we invited school superintendents from all the public schools and the president of their board. And we invited business, some of the business folks that are here today, to get together and talk about what can we do to get everybody on the same page between, students coming out of school and having them totally and completely ready for the workplace and having all the right skills. And I'll touch more on the skill piece a little later. But what came out of that were two things. One was the interns and externships. I personally didn't know what an externship was until that day, and it's getting teachers out into the workforce. It would be great in the banking business if we could get a teacher to come to the workplace, understand exactly, adding and subtracting, multiplying and dividing are great tools, but how do they come to be, and how are they used in the workplace? So that was one of the things that came out of that. The externships are great. Internships, same thing. We personally, at the bank do not adhere to, having interns because of the feeling of privacy issues and whatever. But getting them out there and understanding ahead of time how to interface and interact with everybody, how to use those skills before they get out of school. The other thing that I just want to touch base on was Jake, you mentioned a couple times the work readiness credentials. Where's Michelle Armani? I'm going to call you out there. Michelle, put your hand up in the air. Come on, Michelle. There you go. Right here in the third row. Michelle has done a fabulous job. She's an employee at CV Tech. When we had the summit in Lake Placid, we kind of had this in our back pocket, but we didn't really want to force it out there that it was going to be something. And when we brought it out, the school superintendents and business really thought it was a fabulous program, and it's really turning out to be just that. Basically, Michelle sets up partnerships with schools. Yours, Jake, was the first one really that kind of piloted this. And it's getting students, is it 8 weeks or 10 weeks, Michelle?
Depending upon the school, it's very flexible, it's skill-based, so if the school district wanted to run a semester-long or year-long program, they can do 8 to 10 weeks. We try to keep it very flexible, so it's usable and
that's it. And so you take a student, who's getting ready to graduate, you run them through this. There's a rigorous test at the end, but they're demonstrating skills that are a lot of the soft skills that aren't necessarily taught in the schools themselves. We're getting it out. It's not it really doesn't cost a lot of money. It's really just maybe shifting small resources into some of the testing and those kinds of things. And it's been very effective with schools and getting them ready, getting students prepared for the workforce.
I think it provides employers with a level of confidence that the people who are going to come to work are going to understand getting to work on time and the kinds of responsibilities they will be prepared for, the kind of friction that always occurs from one time to another in the workplace, and how to handle that and how to handle themselves. And Michelle has done a wonderful job with that, and I'm one of those people who reads Speak Out. So I will tell you, there was a shout out to Michelle in Speak Out. Was it yesterday or today? About part of her program also is to have people donate work clothes and things that people could wear to interviews. And she has a good fashion sense to help folks down there. And there was somebody who said, thank you very much. It was a great program. So those are the kinds of things that don't cost a lot of money,
Right.
but really transform how people have access to the workforce.
That might lead into our second characteristic, which is a clearly defined career pathway. People come out of college and sometimes it's hard for them to find a job in their field. They don't know things like, what do you wear to work? How do we help them get on a career track?
Whoever.
That's an always-
Yeah, I think, first and foremost, having proper skill sets, all right? Transferable from one job. You talked about clustering, and I know you talked about that in a little bit. But having skill sets that, if they don't know what they want to do, for a lifelong career, giving them the skill sets that they can transfer from one job to another. Okay, number one. Number two, obviously we have through the Workforce Investment Board, we have a program called Solid Foundations. All right, it takes 18, I think they're 18 to 24-year-olds, some of who have not graduated from high school. They go through this program, they get their GED, they work with the trades. We've been running it with the trades, and they're skill sets where they learn fractions in the morning, and then they cut lumber in the afternoon, and they have to use fractions to make that happen. And it sounds like really simplistic things, but it's stuff that doesn't necessarily get taught in the classroom. So we've got those, and we have, Michelle's got a great closet of stuff to help people get ready for an interview, go out there. But most importantly, when we talk about pathways, the lifelong learning. We're in an era now where skills that you learned a few years ago are becoming obsolete, and they need to be freshened up. And so it's continuing. The Workforce Investment Board has really just a lot of collaborations with Clinton Community College, CV Tech, the school districts, and that's how we're kind of helping establish those pathways.
We use the word pathways. A lot of times I use the analogy of lifelong learning is kind of like an interstate highway with lots of on-ramps and off-ramps. And I'm going to use an example again from CV Tech. There's an FAA certification program there in the Plattsburgh Aeronautical Institute, and that stands on its own. That credential on its own is a good start for somebody to gain entry into that area of the workforce. That could be the off-ramp that some students take. On the other hand, after they've been out and working with that credential for a while, there's an on-ramp back into Clinton Community College that allows them to use what they've already done to have 1 year of advanced standing toward their associate's degree. And so it goes. These programs, sometimes we say they're stackable, and they don't always have to be done in immediate sequence with each other. The idea of lifelong learning is there ought to be lots of opportunities for people to jump back in at a time in their career when they need that next level of skill. Maybe they're going from a technical frontline worker to a middle-level manager, and maybe from a middle-level manager to a higher-level manager. And the types of programs that we offer entree to at different points in a person's career give them those sort of pathways, or the on-ramps and off-ramps, as I like to talk about it.
Mm-hmm.
I would contend we have a lot of work to do, though. And a lot of it's no-cost work, which is probably important to say. The more people in the schoolhouse understand how they can contribute and be of value to business, the better. The more the business community can understand how it can support and use the schools, the better. That conversation has to continue to go on. If employers looking for entry-level employees asked specifically, show me your workforce readiness credential, show me high school transcript that you passed certain levels of math, or in science. No matter what the entry-level job is, if the demand was there, the word would come through, and it would have higher expectations would come through the school, both for students and parents and people in the school. The more the school is aware of what we can do and change little parts of the curriculum, or how we talk with kids, or how we do career pathway guidance, by having a partnership with the businesses, we could do this. We have a lot to do there. We have tons of examples where we see it works really well, but I think we need commitment. We need people to actually say, show me that credential, show me your diploma, show me something, and for us to be able to respond, what is it you would like to see as a business community, and how do we start building that up in our school? The more that energy occurs, this will take off. If it doesn't, we'll just be where we are today, a bit frustrated and not getting to exactly where you want to get to.
But Jake, I think in our summit, back in Lake Placid, that's exactly what we saw.
It was,
We
yeah.
anticipated somewhat of an adversarial,
Yeah.
you've got business on this side and,
Yeah.
the education system on this side, and they're going to be pointing fingers, and really it wasn't. It was very much, the business was more than happy to talk about things like externships and what can we do to let the schools know what students need when they come out. And it was the same thing on the educational side. It was very accepting too. Yeah, we want business to be involved.
Yeah.
So we need to keep that going and keep that conversation alive.
I think schools now see their students as their customers, and they see the taxpayers as their customers. But I think it's also important to add business folks
Right.
in the
Right.
community and job creators as their customers as well. And I think it's a pretty simple concept, but perhaps one that hasn't, both sides haven't demanded it.
That's the point, right?
Dory, let's talk about number 3, which is a strong and diverse economy. In Clinton County, I think people think we have a lot of state jobs and we have a lot of industry. Are we diverse enough?
Well, I think maybe I'll just start a little bit by saying that in economic development, there's essentially 2 schools of thought. There are those who say every community has to have the most diverse economy it can, so it protects itself from the ups and downs in any particular industry. Then there are those who say we want to work on clusters, and we want to look at a cluster that we have that we may be able to be opportunistic about. Frankly, I think that our community is one in which we don't have the luxury of being Austin, Texas, and can choose one side, or we can just say whoever comes through the door is okay with us. I think we have some strengths, and I think the cluster perspective tells you that we need to capitalize on those strengths. So in general, we have students who graduate from our local schools who have in the past been employed at places like Wyeth, which have very high standards for work, and those are people at the high school level, graduation level, at the 2-year level, and the 4-year, and masters, and on up the chain. So I think it's important for us to look at cluster strengths that we have now. We have a community that, to a large extent, respects folks who work in manufacturing. And so it is considered a good thing to work at GP. It was considered a good thing to work at Wyeth, Pfizer, in Rouse's Point. And I think that businesses that we have here now, like Novabus and Bombardier, put us in that transportation equipment cluster. So I think we have to work on those clusters and the cross-training and the ways that the community college can prepare people to go into to work for those and for ones that may be on the horizon. But at the same time, that requires you to look at diverse other kinds of things that can provide a smoother transition to companies like Bombardier and Novabus, which, while wonderful, have some cyclic and contractual things that go up and down. So I think, and I think I can probably speak for most of the economic developers in our area who've worked in this area, that you really want to look at the training and the creation of good manufacturing jobs, and at the same time, really look for that. So this is your niche kind of thing. This is the niche that you're really good at, and then begin to exploit some other areas that can be strong. And I see us locally here over the last year or two being relatively successful in finding companies that wanted to come here, international companies that do green jobs is sort of hackneyed, but are looking at technology savvy, forward thinking, very strongly looked to the future, and high-tech jobs. I'm not sure we're ever going to be Corning. I'm not sure we're ever going to be Rochester. I don't think that's the case. I think we need to be realistic. But people like SMART, which is at the former Air Force Base, and APG Neuros really show the kinds of companies that will look at the people who are here and the opportunities here and think they can be successful. And they provide balance and more equilibrium to these other more cyclic jobs.
Do we have a skilled enough labor force?
I think we do. And if I could give you an example of how we positioned ourselves to be early on when Bombardier came to town, and I know Elaine Reynolds is out there. I remember her being on the early Workforce Investment Board, and where she served as chairman, and really trying to provide for classes for blueprint reading. And there were hundreds of people who took those courses, some short, some longer, to access jobs in Bombardier. And it was something new to our community. With respect to Novabus, we have good training partners, but for the first time, I think in a long time, we said this 200 to 300 jobs is really a big nut to crack. We have lots and lots of different kinds of jobs and training, and we worked with Paul Grasso, and the community college took leadership, and we had a matrix of providers of training. The community college was the leader. BOCES provided some of the training. SciTech, I see Bill Murray out there. The Chamber, which has a very well-respected OSHA program, provided that. And so we were able to integrate that into, from the consumer, Novabus's perspective, we did everything they wanted without them having to see all the strings we had to pull from behind.
But you know what I think,
That's right.
no, you're right. You're absolutely right. The advantage, I think, one of the advantages we have, with the community college and CV Tech and chamber programs, we can adjust those in a relatively fast turnaround time and make programs that are necessary for training certain skills. I mean, the WIB's job in all of this is really just the conduit to get the funding. Paulie works a lot on grant funding to for job training and all of those types of things. And it's great. There's a great collaboration between the WIB and the educational systems, so that when we have another, when Laurentian goes or whatever the next opportunity is, we've got great relationships, and we can turn those programs around relatively quick and get the education and training out there.
Todd, I think you did that for the wind energy program. You came up very quickly with a training program for that.
Yeah, there are a number of examples. Dory mentioned Novabus. You mentioned the wind energy and turbine technology. One of the things community colleges like to be known for, at least relative to other types of educational institutions, is that we can turn around relatively quickly with program development. I want to mention one more time this workforce development roundtable that we have, and it sort of knits together a lot of the themes that we've been talking about today. It's a roundtable, a council of peers, not only of representatives from the different education sectors, but also from business and industry. And the point that I'm leading up to is this: that if we do that right, and it's only existed about 6 months in its current form, but if we do that right, that I think really becomes part of our competitive advantage. I hope that organizations like the Development Corporation and the Chamber of Commerce and others who are in contact with potential businesses and industries who would locate here can hold that up and say, see, this is the kind of community that is willing to roll up its sleeves, to work outside of those silos. And yes, there's certainly a lot of work left to be done, but what we're hoping is that the mere fact that we're communicating across those silos will, and I think already has, given us quite a competitive advantage.
Now, Lisa, you have a very challenging job. You have to try to recruit doctors to come here when there's so many places they could go and that might seem to have more advantages. How do you sell this area?
Well, we have a lot of wonderful assets, as I'm sure everyone agrees with. Certainly Lake Champlain, the Adirondack Mountains. At our meeting last week, we were talking about the various things that sell, a community. We may say we're an hour from Montreal, we're an hour from Burlington, we're an hour from, Lake Placid. Well, my first job is to sell Plattsburgh, and then the others will come as a bonus. So we have a lot of wonderful things. We have great school systems, and I think partnering and knowing all of these wonderful organizations and programs that we have to offer to get people to relocate here is very important. Low crime, lower than the national average cost of living. Those are all things that we have that maybe another city, a couple states over, doesn't have. And with the hospital, we've certainly had to adjust our model to recruit physicians. Historically, we've always brought physicians in to open up their own private practice. The day of physicians doing that is, it still exists, don't get me wrong, but certainly the majority of physicians that are out there looking for opportunities are looking for employed models with organizations. So fortunately, the hospital did respond to the market out there and created a model to employ physicians. And that not only helped us to recruit physicians from all over the country, it also helped us to retain some of the physicians that we already have and can't stand to lose. I could name many physicians right here, easily 10 of them. And that would have hurt us. If one left our community, it would have hurt. So, thank heavens the hospital was forward-thinking enough, embraced it. It wasn't easy. There certainly was a lot of people that had to come to the table and to make it all happen. So actually last year was our most successful year on record, and that was because of the efforts of many, many people. And that's not just the hospital, it's all of you folks too. You've got trailing spouses, and you need, again, the good schools. You need, a good YMCA. You need all great universities and colleges. So it all plays a part, and, really people do select jobs because of the location, right? Location, location, location. I spend a fair amount of time speaking with physicians and their families about our location. We talk about the job, but then we spend a lot of time on the location.
Do you have to find jobs for the husband or wife?
Absolutely.
So you're
Absolutely.
trying to
Absolutely.
recruit for two different jobs.
Exactly.
So
So
you
the
must
job
have
is
to
twofold.
work in partnership a lot with
Sure,
different.
the job is twofold, and we certainly like to make the opportunity realistic. I don't like to sugarcoat things. I like to be realistic. I don't want someone to come here and say, oh, well, you told me you have, Montessori schools, or whatever the case may be. We're going to be very factual, but we're going to find those resources for them that they need. Again, it's meeting their needs. You can't put that round peg in the square.
What are some of the things they ask about? What do they want most in a community?
Well, it's very individual, to be very honest. What's important to, physician A is very different for physician B. So it's completely different from one candidate to the next. You know, there are some common threads there. You know, a lot of people want quality of life and certainly affordable homes. Again, the good schools. So those things are often at the beginning of a conversation when we're trying to, you know, woo people to our community.
Lisa, one of the things that has gone unsaid today, but we talk about it quite a lot of us don't think of this as a college town, but you know, outside the immediate North Country area, if you hear the name Plattsburgh, you think of, oh, SUNY Plattsburgh. And I imagine for a lot of the physicians and the health professionals that come to this area,
Yes.
that has a certain draw to it, to be in a
Absolutely.
community where there is a significant four-year college, in our case, SUNY Plattsburgh.
Exactly, both for a trailing spouse or even the candidate themselves. They may be interested in you know, another degree and continuing on, but their children, you know, if they're looking at the long road, that their children are going to go through elementary school and secondary education, and certainly having good colleges in the community is part of the picture too.
What about culture? How important is that?
That's very important. You know, we're again looking nationally, and a diverse workforce is important, certainly very important, and that comes up often. You know, a lot of times I'll hear physicians say, you know, we want to be in New York City, and again, Montreal does help us because we do have a lot of culture, you know, very close by. There is culture in our immediate community, as you all, you know, maybe not quite as much as we would like sometimes, but it does exist. Again, with the universities and the colleges, that helps. There's certainly various cultures that are apparent there. And again, with the hospital, we've got a diverse group of employees and physicians, so that is very important.
Josh, you're a great example of that. You're somebody who grew up here, moved away, lived in New York City for a long time, and you're back here. One of the strategies that is important is to attract and retain young people. You're a young, successful business owner.
Sure.
Your story is a great one. Tell it.
Well, as you said, I grew up here in Beekmantown, attended Beekmantown High School, graduated from Beekmantown, went on to school in Rochester for a year, and then moved to New York City, where I went to school at FIT for interior design, and worked as an interior designer and event planner in New York. And spending 10 years in New York, with my shoulders up to my ears, especially the last few years, and without very many opportunities to come home to visit my family who still lives in the area, I decided it was time to come back. So I left all the hustle and bustle and came back here, kind of got my feet on the ground and decided I wanted to begin what I did in New York City in Plattsburgh, you know, doing some demographic research and finding that there was a need for the services that I provide. I thought it would be a perfect fit, and that was 2 years ago, and I'm very happy with where I am today. Able to have dinner with my family every Sunday and see my 2 nieces grow up, it's an important thing.
What would you like to see developed here to make more young people feel like they want to come back here and work here? What does this area need?
Well, I think maybe I'll preface that response with a story. And I know a young woman who actually relocated to the North Country. She lived in Michigan, and she came here to Plattsburgh for a job opportunity, which she took, and she worked in this position, administrative position, for approximately 5 years. And at that time, she decided that it was time to start a family with her husband. And she approached the executive director of the organization she worked for, asking if he was willing to give her some flexibility in scheduling, where potentially they would be able to raise their children without using daycare, being able to, you know, nurture them in the early developmental years, which was very important to them. So this executive director, he agreed, and he allowed her to work half-time from home and half-time at the office. And during this year, she actually showed increased productivity, and it was something that I think was maybe not necessarily a surprise to her employer, because he knew the kind of work ethic she had. But after that year, the director resigned, and new leadership stepped in, and this was not a practice that they were willing to accommodate. And because of that, she resigned and stays at home now. And it's very difficult economically for them, but it's finding the priorities. And the priority for them was to be with their children and to have that bond with them in the early years to help them. So.
What about technology? How can it help people be flexible?
Well, you know, with increased broadband in rural areas, which is something that's being promoted, it's very important because once the employers begin to catch on to this idea of being able to telecommute and to work from home, having that high-speed internet opportunity is key to the success of implementing it.
Other areas seem like they work more with people on working out of their homes. You hear about people, but it's not that common here, is it?
And honestly, it's something that's really easy to do. And once, you know, we begin to implement that and employers, you know, unify and say, this is something that can work for us, you know, they'll find increased productivity, they'll find more loyalty, you know, to employers by these employees. And also that's a way that we can brand our area as being a place that has flexibility for young people. And that's how we can attract the young people. You know, we have the natural resources, we have the beautiful Lake Champlain, proximity to metropolitan areas, and to be able to offer that, you know, as marketing to attract young people here is huge.
And I think there really are certain professions and jobs that really lend themselves to this sort of thing. And I think I have seen in our business, just in our small company, preparing ourselves for snow days and all of that stuff, the use of technology that really helps us to be productive even in days like that. I know for many years the Chamber of Commerce has been forward-thinking in having some of their employees spend a significant portion of their time working from home. And in some cases, you know, I think there can be, for some positions, there can really be an increase of productivity. And I think there are ways to, you know, if you have concerns about that, there's certainly ways that you can be sure that you are having the kind of productivity. That being said, I think FaceTime is always an important thing. And so I had a son who worked for a big international company, and they had one day a week in which they went to the office in Chicago. And other than that, different people came to the office at different times. Everybody was sort of online together and, you know, having teleconferences from Korea in the middle of the night and all of that sort of thing. And just based on his anecdotal things, he really loved it. It provided lots of flexibility for him not to have a long commute and be productive during those what would have been commuting hours. But I think it's important that we also preserve those personal interactions that I think that are assets. I want to go back to a question that you asked about what are people looking for and what are physicians looking for when they come here. I think I've heard essentially the same set of questions from virtually every big company that has talked with us about coming here. And what are the things that really provide a comfort level to them? We are a really small community. We have our own public television station. We have a regional hospital with an increasing amount of respect. We have institutions here, the State University, our own community college. So we have institutions here that can convert a person who might have come from a Big Ten to say, well, these are really the important things. I'm going to be able to get good medical care. My children will be able to go to a good public school. There are cultural things that are here that are available, that public television station and public radio station that are local, our own newspaper. I mean, there are loads and loads of communities that don't have those things. So that, I think, provides a comfort level to people who come from, you know, Montreal or Tokyo or Seoul. You know, that there are some basic things that they see as crucial to a community, a vibrant community that we really have here. And I think we all need to understand the value of those institutions to all of us.
Exactly.
Jimmy, one of the things involved is integrated infrastructure. Now, infrastructure can be everything from broadband to roads, but nobody's pouring money into the county and giving you all kinds of money for things. How do you maintain the infrastructure?
Well, the truth of the matter is, we haven't had money pouring in for a period of time. It's like school systems haven't had tons of money coming to them, and colleges, and I think it's a matter of investing where you can and using the dollars as best that you can. Just as an example, it was initiated pretty much as soon as I started on the legislature. I wasn't the leader on that. It was different leadership in place at that time. But as I understood it, like for instance, our county roads, they had been diminishing, and money had been diverted to Medicare issues and Medicaid. And so when the tobacco settlement came around, the county invested a majority of that money into their roads. It was going to replace every road within 10 or 12 years' time, and just into the first 2 years of it, they realized that if they were going along at that rate, some of the roads in the outlying areas that were scored, they were already going to be down to rubble. So they mixed that in with the tobacco settlement money and their own ban money, and they completed all the roads in a 7-year period of time. And now they're trying to maintain them by crack sealing and coating them and checking them and overlaying them so that it minimizes the whole tear downs that had occurred because they just go bad. The towns get their CHIPS money, and if you look at any community, any of the 14 towns or whatever, look at where a majority of their money goes into, and it's their highway. It's just part of our basic infrastructure is our roads. Then when you look at your municipalities and how we get our electricity and how we have our utilities to our home, our water and sewer and so forth, it's not the easiest thing. You pretty much have to do it on a small budget, and if you're looking for handouts, they're just not there. And then some of the ones that do occur, we did a project in Chateaugay, which was replacing the Narrows Bridge, and because it was money from the feds, from the current administration, we had to hire twice as many inspectors as we normally do. And then you go through this whole process where they scrutinize it so much, and you think that the project is done. And of course, because it was federal dollars, you have to follow a process where the lowest bidder is going to get that job. Didn't always maybe had the best reputation or hadn't had a whole lot of experience in it or whatever. And even though it had so much oversight, the long and short of it is that bridge failed already. And that bridge is going to have to be torn out and redone. Okay? Even though it went through as much as it did. But here's the real kicker. Because they're federal dollars and everybody signed off on it, we had to fight with Congress. Normally you would then go after that contractor's bond. You would then go through that process. But the feds would have released the money to you for that project. They were withholding it because it failed. They had already signed off on it, but now the county has to go and borrow the money again, $1.some million to replace that bridge. And then we still have to collect from the bond issue on the first one. Look, we've worked through this, and we at least have half of half of the money now to do it. But I mean, it's just an example of how you try to do a process, you try to help out, and then you're your own worst enemy because you scrutinize it too much, and then you try to overcompensate for it afterwards. And I don't mean to be negative about it, but
But you don't have to go very far. You could, take the ferry to our east, or you could take the highways to our south, and you can find a lot of places where the infrastructure is not in the good condition that it is here. And having only recently moved to this area, just coming up on 2 years ago, I can attest to that personally. This infrastructure of highways, to take one example, is really kind of, I think it does give us a competitive advantage here.
I have to agree.
I think the county also has done some things that I think have been very wise. A couple of years ago, they brought in a person to their planning department who had really experience in public transportation. In a time with rising gas prices, and that what was happening a couple of years ago, it seemed really very thoughtful of them. And today, it seems even more thoughtful. Anybody who hasn't been on the street and come up to one of their buses, now you know what they look like. They have an identity. They stop more places. They're very responsive. I mean, this is a different view of what infrastructure is. One of the first questions that Novabus asked us was, and Victoria was there that day, do you have bus transportation? Or is there a bus stop nearby? Obviously, they're in the bus business.
Right.
And so we really have to look at that, and what a transformation there has been. They have their own facility to take care of buses. They have new buses. They are responsive to people's needs, and they're going to be able to get workers from locations at far ends of the county into town in a much more cost-effective way than perhaps their own personal transportation. So I think having professional management of this particular the bus transportation has been a great asset. But in general, I think the county has done a good job of having professional people there. They have a highway engineer, they have a county administrator who really, I think, bring they address issues and bring issues that the county can address to the forefront, and I think that's been a real positive thing.
Jim, one of the things I think
Kudos to
that you and the county legislature can be justly proud of is the fact that our little community here in Clinton County has a runway and an airport that can land jumbo jets. And how many other towns our size can say that, where there are 3 flights daily to Boston.
Exactly.
There are frequent flights throughout the week to places like Myrtle Beach and the Orlando area in Florida, and so on and so on. I think that's a great tribute to you and the legislature.
Definitely.
How important is that airport to recruiting, to everything?
Huge. It's certainly within the first 15 minutes of the first conversation I have with candidates.
Really?
The
People want to know how
airport,
they can get out of
87
here?
Amtrak. No, that when they have their vacation, they're able to go to these wonderful places and get there easily. That is
Where
very
did you have them
important. Big
fly in
selling
prior to that airport?
You don't want me to say, do
Yeah.
you?
No,
No, it's very, very important.
Okay, so we're going to now go to questions and answers. If anybody has something they'd like to ask. Aaron and Steve are here, or you can ask it yourself.
You want to write it? I'm here.
Yeah, go ahead.
Jake, this question is for you. John gave us some examples of how the community college was able to be responsive to community needs. Do you see the high school being able to be as responsive to community needs? And if not, why not?
Well, we have many bosses in a sense, and many things pulling at us. Regents diploma requirements for graduation are one main track, and then at the other side, we have to think about all these other areas like responsive to business. What we need to do is we need to have first a better understanding of what is it we can do. We just don't know. We need what I talked about before,
Right.
that relationship to develop so we can. We are working on the workforce readiness credential as one of those aspects to be able to put that into play. It takes time to develop. We need to know what else the business community could really help or would like to see us do, so then we could be responsive. Part of it is our lack of knowledge of what, and fully admitting our lack of knowledge of how we can respond to that.
I don't think there's a lack of desire on the part
No.
of schools to meet the needs of business.
But-
It is truly an education.
Look, the only way this is gonna work, if there's good partnership, collaborative partnership between schools and business. Or we'll tear each other apart, not meaningly to do that, but we won't be supporting each other, and an area could easily not flourish like it should. We've maintained our engineering program, but the kids that are in the engineering program, they're not going into the immediate workforce. They're going to a college for engineering, and maybe they'll return home. I don't know. We've maintained those sort of things, the programs in the school, but that's not helping the immediate business community. The one thing we would like to be able to keep maintaining is a degree of quality school. We are minimizing our schools, we have to, our scope, but a degree of quality school so you can look, or Lisa can look someone in the eye and say, come live here, it's a good place for your family to be raised, while we're trying to build the rest of that relationship. I think we have that now, but fully admit, we have plenty we need to do in that area.
For any of you, what's our greatest obstacle to establishing the competitive advantage we need? Is there something that stands out that?
I think it's, it can be sort of distilled down to all of us in our silos, whether in the town or the city or the school district or Peru School District, we have responsibility to do excellent work within our boundaries. But perhaps we haven't had the need or to be collaborative with each other. And I think all of us see things going on in the paper between municipalities and who doesn't agree and who in the northern tier doesn't agree. I personally think some sort of collaborative, comprehensive, countywide look is an important thing for people to consider. And I'm not saying that we need to consolidate, but we need to act as if we do have people on our boundaries. I mean, if a comprehensive plan is done and it doesn't consider any of the communities on the outside, then it's not really going to be operational. It just doesn't work. So I'm not exactly sure how that happens, but it seems to me that there are synergies that different school districts can have that can save them money by doing things collaboratively. I think there are communities that can do the same thing. And I think that the county legislature has shown how collegial they have been over the last 10 years and not really taking very many sides and having confrontational things. And I think we should take that as the road to go, and maybe it's the county legislature who try to bring the members of the legislature who try to bring folks in and say, okay, we have a community and we're all dependent on each other in lots of ways. I don't want to sound too naive.
I have to honestly say that I think that it occurs more than people really realize. I don't think it gets enough promotion, to be honest with you. I think you have a couple, not even a couple, I think you have a few that are never going to be satisfied, never going to be happy, and find fault with everything. But I have to tell you that me personally, I see cooperation on a daily basis, whether it be school systems, whether it be municipalities. There's always going to be a little bit of squabbling or whatever. My feeling is that when the rubber hits the road, I really think the community always pulls together and says, the best decision for us is this or that. And then they move on. I don't even see a whole lot of repetitive, bringing up of issues that were like, well, if we'd done it this way, would it be better or that? There are always going to be some misunderstandings, some miscommunications and so on. But I really think overall that we as a community, in every sense of the word, really do a good job.
Any
Come
other,
together when it matters most.
sorry.
I applaud your local efforts in visioning and problem solving. My question is the overhead requirements imposed by Washington and Albany. Do they impede or do they enhance this process?
How much time do you have?
I think they all have a horror story about mandates or
two.
rules. Or how much does that inhibit business?
You know, I think just from the workforce investment side, you know, look at the national economy. We have, you know, the unemployment rate that's you know, around 9%, and again, what do? We take away funding from the Workforce Investment Act. When we want people to get out, get employed, we need to get them trained, get them the skill sets that they need to get those jobs that are different from the jobs they used to do. Yet, and I know Paul battles this all the time, is, you know, how do we come up with funding to do that? Paul would have been actually in Washington today, trying to get the Workforce Investment Act reauthorized, which it's never been done. It's always done on continuing resolutions, and you know, so again, we talk about needing to get people trained and educated and ready for that next step, but yet funding is a huge issue. So.
You had a question.
Yeah, John knows where this is going to come from. Given our region's dependence on Quebec industry and Quebec tourism, to what extent do you all think it's a disadvantage that we don't have an adult service population and a teenage service population that has the ability to speak French with our visitors?
David and I talk about, it's David Graham, adjunct professor of French language and culture. And he and I talk about this all the time. I see Lisa nodding her head. When I go to Montreal, I can be pretty assured that the person that waits on my table for dinner, or the person that checks me into the hotel, or the person that you know, is my tour guide at some tourist attraction, is going to be able to converse with me in my native language, even though that's not theirs. We're working as best we can to try to reciprocate. Wouldn't it be nice when our French-Canadian neighbors arrive here that our wait staff or our front desk clerk or the people that work in the tourism industry, for example, could reciprocate and show how much we appreciate our neighbors and our business partners too. So I think there's some unfinished business there, and David and I know about that.
In Plattsburgh, we teach French, Spanish, German, and Farsi. Farsi is an Iraqi language, highly popular for kids going into governmental agencies or into the military. We only had 8 students take this last year.
Sometimes
It's the enthusiasm and the interest, so it's going to be hard to even hold on to it for next year. We may not.
Right.
When it comes to French and Spanish, I'd almost say it's a 50-50 split. It's probably not exactly that, of what's interesting and popular to a 7th grader when they first start taking a foreign language, which is absolutely, as you will probably very easily agree with me, the wrong time to start teaching a foreign language. If you think of anyone in their middle school years, it's really not the time to introduce new languages and a lot of new things. Their life is complicated enough just getting through the middle school years. To really properly do that in education, we need to do it in kindergarten.
Why
Or
can't
first
you?
grade.
everybody knows
Every-
we should be in begin languages in kindergarten.
Every-
Everybody knows that in this room.
Yep,
But
every
we don't
developed
do it.
country that has solidly bilingual citizens have their native language and one other, a lot of times it's the English language, in the early elementary years. Talk about state mandates and where things are placed upon schools. There's one of our frustrations. But to really do that, we should reinvest. We don't have that ability right now. And revamp and put foreign languages in the elementary.
To your knowledge, is there not a move now on the part of the state education department to make the study of a second language optional rather than required?
There are,
And do you think that's a good idea or not?
Well, I would say it's not, but there are more loopholes available to students to not go through the Regents track second language than instead of the state making it optional, it's optional in a different way with other loopholes. Frankly, I honestly don't think that any of them would be necessary whatsoever if we did the early education in foreign language. It's something I don't have, but I absolutely see in value. I have, my wife is Norwegian, and one of her cousins is a foreign language teacher in Norway, teaches English. We've been visiting, even the youngest of children are extremely, in fact, their English is better than most of ours. At least I'll put myself into that category. We know what we need to do. How do you reverse that? I think even if today, if we did a better job in educating the 7th graders and 8th graders, the value of French language, not just Parisian French, but to be able to communicate with Canada, we might have more kids taking it and more kids being proficient in it, but we're going against a tide of common sense.
There are many schools now, and this would go back to teacher training, that, and we have family members who, they spend half of the day with English-speaking teachers on all of their subjects, and half of the day with foreign language.
Dora, you need to speak up.
So these people would, for example, take math with a Spanish-speaking teacher. And so half the day they're in English, which is their native language, half the day in Spanish. And that requires more than just teachers to teach the language. It requires your teachers to really essentially become more bilingual. This is around the Washington metro area, which has a large Spanish-speaking population, and they do this with other languages as well, because there are so many diplomats and that sort of thing. Public school.
We have some more questions.
I just wanted to add very, very quickly, some of what we're talking about there is like turning an ocean liner, but some of the things we can be very nimble with, and we have a partnership, for example, Clinton Community College and the Chamber of Commerce, where we're doing some short, focused French language courses for the people who work in those sectors that I talked about, and I want to acknowledge the work of David and others here who have.
Could our foreign language teachers work in the summertime supplying a business, hotel industry, food service industry, basic skills, or for anybody that did take French in junior high, to build their skills back up so they have a little bit of conversation at that front door. That then becomes the externship partnerships that we were talking about, is wanting to develop within Plattsburgh. So they have an added value by offering businesses what they're good at, teaching. Schluter Systems is a German company. Our German teacher could easily teach to Schluter new employees before, is it 2 months or something, they go to Germany. But before they go, a few basic conversation clues and words and things. We could support businesses that way, and then we would have a foothold of understanding what businesses need from the other side. Foreign language is a huge opportunity for that.
Dan,
Dan and then Tony.
I was just going to say, so many times we're focused on the immediate need versus the long-term need. And we heard several years ago at a summit that Mandarin Chinese is what we really need to be. That is the largest, or the widest spoken language in the world. Do we need to be thinking about that today so that we're better positioned down the road? By the time these kindergarten kids are getting out, yeah, they need to understand basic French. I mean, that's mandatory because of our relationship to Quebec. But we need to be forward thinking enough too to recognize that the world is changing around us.
The developed nations that teach early second languages, many of those students acquire a third or a fourth language because they already have the affinity for it. We do our best to block that skill development until they're in junior high. I say that tongue in cheek. I'd love to answer that, Dan, by just saying, boy, I wish I had the money to do such a thing. It's a partial bad answer because we need to find ways to do things that money's not the answer for or the cure. But those are the angles that we need to try and find ways to shoot at.
Tony, you want to grab the next question?
Just echoing earlier, the great success the group has had in individual things, whether it's working with the counties or individuals. But most of those successes have come with taxpayer-based funding coming, whether it's putting the airport in or the Workforce Investment Board or so. And as we all know, things are really getting tight going forward. So as individual groups working together and such, are we starting to look at how can we keep this momentum going with less funding as we move through that? Are we having that? I know Bill's here with SciTech, and they looked at many years ago, funding was going to dry up. How do we start to do some privatization or whatever to make that momentum continue? Is that any discussions going into groups?
Tony, I think, John's workforce development initiative, which kind of started out as like being a clearinghouse for training and whatever, and then kind of morphed into really, as I see, as part of that, trying to at least get a handle on where we're going to need to be as we go down the road in the way of jobs and of training and just being prepared for it. So, I mean, yes, I think there's a good collaboration of people, not just here, but within this room as well, realizing that the pot isn't going to get any larger. We have to work together and use each other's resources and funds to make that. I know, Dr. Mack is sitting in the audience, and we're constantly, working with those folks to find programs that, dovetail off of somebody else's program so that you're not reinventing everything or spending twice as much money. So those collaborations are there for sure.
Collaborations, or call it public-private partnerships. This lecture series is a small example of that. Clinton Community College, didn't have funds in its operating budget to put on the luncheon and so on. But with our partners in the Development Corporation, we've managed to come up with what I think is a pretty good series of 4 lectures. As we talk about our Workforce Development Roundtable, we have private business there at the table to work at the margins. We provide a meeting place and we provide sort of the convening space for that conversation, but our private business partners help us out there. As we embark here at Clinton Community College on some of our physical plant needs over the next 5 years or so, as our facilities master plan develops, we're looking at how do public-private partnerships play into that so that it's not just taxpayer money. So Tony, that's kind of a really quick, broad brush answer, but I think that's where the future lies for us, because we all know that the taxpayer support has been maxed out long ago, and now we've got to make some corrections in the other direction.
And speaking of the lunch, it is ready now, so
segue.
we're gonna go out there, and people can still talk to people at lunch and ask them questions. So, thank you.
Thank you.